Issue with my computer. I'm gonna move back. My computer's just not charging. Oh, you know, I'll switch it. Yeah. The tech problem exists between keyboard and chair.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all good. I'll just, charge it.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 6, 2023 meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission. It is 3:30 p.m. and we'll start with the roll call. Mr. Ballard,
Slid into home at the last minute.
present. Mr. Shoemaker,
Here.
Mr. Lancaster,
Present.
myself, Mr. Hopkins,
Present.
Mr. Lewis,
Here.
Mr. Smith,
Present.
Mr. Leclerc,
Present.
and Mr. Song.
Present.
On the ex officio side of the list, Mr. Wasson from ACHD,
Present.
Lila Komplestein from Compass, Mr. Reinhardt from WASD,
Present.
Elisa Taysom with VRT, and Mr. Price with ITD.
Present.
Thank you. The next item is to introduce our new Meridian Police Department representative, Sergeant Tara Smith. She's told me a moment ago, she's still trying to decide after 18 years if she likes the MPD. She's recently been moved, pushed, prodded, asked, I don't know which, to traffic. And has got very little introduction to what we're all about. I told her we're a lot of fun. We'll pop up with questions out of the blue to see if she can throw us an answer or tell us she'll look for it. And she actually has some data with her today on one of our items that I put out a question on last Friday, and I'm surprised to have a little bit back we'll hear about later today. So welcome. Anything else about yourself you'd like to tell us? Are you a native from Meridian, from Idaho? Where'd you go to school?
I'm actually from West Virginia originally. So I am a transplant just from the other coast. So yeah, I've been here about 19 years.
Okay, well, again, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, sir.
Next item is the adoption of the agenda. Chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I would like to pass a motion to adopt the agenda.
we have a second.
Second.
A motion and a second by Mr. Lewis. Caleb, do we have any staff changes to the agenda? Okay, anyone else have a change? All in favor of the adoption?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think since last we met, the city council voted on the 5-year work plan that we proposed. I'd like a report if there's any changes to what we had proposed or what we had heard last.
So, Mr. Chair, I can certainly give a brief update during either project updates or staff communications.
Okay, if you would, please. We'll add that to staff communications. Any other changes? All in favor of adopting the agenda as announced?
Aye.
Any opposed? It is adopted. Next item is the approval of the minutes of February 6th. Does anyone have any comments, questions, changes?
Mr. Chair. Under transportation projects update, which is on page 4, I believe Cherry was misspelled. It should be Cherry.
Okay. Mr. Hood is picking up that. Anyone else? I have a couple of things. On page 1 of the meeting minutes, which is page 3 of our packet, old business items, number 2, celebration and development request. The second line says that ACHD will be restricting some parking on Celebration from their driveway south of Overland. I believe, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, that should read on Celebration from the Griddle driveway south to Overland.
That's correct. That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Hood, got that? Okay. And then on packet page 4, item 6, staff communications, the last line of that 3-line first paragraph, staff at city and ACHD are making improvements for request. I'm suggesting that read, and Mr. Wasson can correct me if I'm wrong. Staff at city and ACHD are working on changing the system of reporting requests for review.
I'll have to follow up with our planning department on that one.
How would you, what suggestion would you make? I just thought making improvements for requests was a little vague.
I agree with
and
you.
looking for something a little more definitive for the minutes.
I don't have anything more definitive, but I'll get something.
Caleb, could you check with, after the fact, check with Miranda, and if she says he's wrong, she's right, I'll go along.
Well, Mr. Chair, I can do that. Maybe I'll just offer some proofreading on the spot and see if everyone concurs. And we're not rewriting history. We're just trying to clean the record up a little bit, right? Staff at City and ACHD are working to make improvements for future requests.
Better, thank
It
you.
doesn't, it says we're talking and
Okay, no, that's better. And then the next paragraph, right after that, traffic light at Blue Heron and Meridian Road was requested by a resident. Mr. Martin will conduct an evaluation.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD, the traffic count has been submitted. Mother Nature has not been playing nice with us, so we haven't been able to get hoses out to get both speeds and volumes, and what we're looking for is a 2-day volume count north of Blue Heron and on Blue Heron east of Meridian Road. Once we get that back, we'll be able to do the analysis. I would not think that the numbers are going to turn out incredibly favorable for a signal.
And who was Mr. Martin?
Sean Martin.
John, okay.
so Mr. Chair, just to clarify, you'd like to add Sean to the minutes? Okay.
And then the next paragraph, second citizen request about the speed limit from Fairview to Ustick be changed back to the previous speed. Determined from ACHD that there was no speed change. I would suggest that was be changed to had been no speed change.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD. The speed limit was changed. It was changed from 35 to 40 miles an hour because the data reflected, we'd received a previous request and the data reflected that 40 to 45 was a more appropriate speed for that. We coordinated with Meridian Police Department, and based upon their comments and the data that was reflected, we changed the speed limit to a more consistent 40 miles an hour, which is reflective of what people are driving out there. And it's also the speed limit that the other north-south corridors are.
So at the last meeting, we were told there'd been no speed limit change,
I was in error, Mr. Chair.
but the new information is that it was changed.
Yes, sir.
I would still suggest these minutes of history read had been no speed change. And then we'll pick up in the minutes of this meeting that it,
That's a mea culpa on me.
yes, sir.
Out of context, a second citizen requested a speed limit Fairview to Houston. Fairview is east-west. West. So what street has changed? South.
Meridian Road, Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I think the minutes are correct, but we could add Locust Grove to it. So in the staff communications from last month, there was, let's see, it says we received the following request from Dan Derby regarding the speed limit on Locust Grove. Then there was some correspondence from Joshua Sack at ACHD that said that one hasn't changed. So I think the clarification needs to be that the request was on Locust Grove from Fairview to Ustick, and that fixes the issue.
Mr. Hood, are we good?
So I did not hear that part of the meeting last month. So if that's what happened, then I can have the minutes reflect that. I was tracking that. I thought that was Meridian Road with the second and third paragraphs, very small paragraphs. But if one is a
think Mr.
Locust
Lancaster-
Grove,
Mr. Lancaster's reading from the last meeting's staff communication paragraph.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Page 16, item 6.
of last month's.
Okay, and then the last thing I had was the paragraph that starts at the bottom of packet page 4. Final item after the request from elected officials, ACHD and staff to kick off an interagency task force. I don't believe there's anything in that paragraph that continues on the next page about the fact that a Transportation Commission member would participate in that task force, and that was decided at that meeting.
Okay.
And that's the man to my left. Okay, that's all I've got. Anything else, anybody? Did we ever get a motion to approve? We didn't, did we? So we need a motion to approve as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, I didn't see the motion. The second one, Mr. Ballard.
Yeah, it was Tracy.
Okay. He thought moving to my other side would help me know who was who, but it isn't working very well. Okay, motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hood, Transportation Projects Update, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. First, let me just apologize. Usually we don't have that many changes to the minutes. You may have noticed the packet was done earlier than usual, well in advance. So that was a good thing. We didn't have the time though, usually to proofread. So I appreciate the help with that, but I apologize that you had to help with that. And you're stuck with me today. So Miranda's out. So that's part of the reason we got the packet done earlier. She's been out and will be out. So yeah, your patience, and I'm done this before, but it's been a minute. So bear with me. All right. So item 2 on page 6, Transportation Commission projects updates. I'm just going to highlight a couple things, right? I'm not going to read it to you. You have the information in the packet. Mr. Chair, you mentioned to update the commission on changes from council since the Transportation Commission looked at priorities for this year to send to ACHD. I actually had it highlighted in this section on page 6, a little bit there. So we did submit the prioritization list to ACHD by their deadline. So February 14th, it was transmitted to them. There was also a joint meeting between the City Council and the ACHD Commission on the 23rd of February. Prior to that and during that meeting, there was a specific item that talked about how ACHD goes about their prioritization process. There was some of that discussion at council. There was quite a bit of talk, and this is where I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. Miranda was present for the first time that council talked about the priorities that you guys sent to them as your recommendation for this year. So I missed the first part. I did attend and heard the second part of that. The McMillan corridor was a big topic of discussion. It lacks pedestrian facilities, and at ACHD, it really isn't planned for much capacity improvements. It's a 3-lane facility, so you don't get a whole lot of bang for the buck, if you will. A cost benefit isn't there when you widen a corridor like that, when you got a large irrigation facility on one side and transmission corridor for Idaho Power on the other, which it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to move each one of those poles. So it's a constrained corridor, but it doesn't function very well. So the council had a pretty robust discussion about, well, it's important though. So, if we move it up, but it doesn't get this, how well is it going to do at ACHD? How important is it to our community? We still want some of the things like bicycle and pedestrian improvements. That's important, but how's it going to score? And again, kind of cost benefit for a lot of that. So they really didn't, and this is where I need to be a little careful because I did not compare your list to their second list. I know at the meeting I attended, they did not make any changes to the priority list, but they did talk about, and again, I'm going off of memory. I'm sorry I didn't bring it, but like the McMillan corridor had like priorities 7, 8, and 11 somewhere in there was a top 15, and they were right there. And they thought about maybe moving them up a little bit, but at the end of the day, the motion was to leave the list of priorities essentially the same. council also had a pretty robust discussion, again, what I just kind of alluded to with pedestrian and bicycle facilities and how best should we make this process happen. So even to the point of clearing up some of the minutes before, council wants us, the collective us, to make the prioritization process more of an ongoing thing. That may not mean monthly, but it doesn't mean we'll start it in January, February, so we can get it done. So I think even later this spring and summer, we're gonna keep this on the front of your radar. So it's a kind of an ever evolving discussion throughout the year. And then when it comes to January to send your list, we've been talking about it. And it's not just 1 or 2 months that we talk about it, but it's something that is regularly discussed. Not quite sure how we're going to do that, but that is something that council wants us to do. Also increasing the coordination with the school district, with our parks department, and with ACHD. So again, some of those requests coming to a centralized location, making sure that the priority list does reflect the priorities of our community. And maybe that even means coming up with our own matrix of what is most important to our community. So is it crashes? Is it travel times? What are those things that goes into this? So it isn't just yeah, I like this one and I don't like that one. Council really wanted an ability to say, this is why this project is higher than that one. Look at how it scores, quote unquote. So we're going to kind of put that on your radar and agenda to discuss is, okay, let's make this more of a science than an art and really kind of dig into what's important to our community. So that doesn't directly answer Commissioner Lancaster's questions, but at the end of the day for this year, they didn't change much, but they were hesitant, I'll just say it that way, with listless because they're like, these feel important to me, but I can't explain that. I don't know how but it feels like this should be higher. And they're like, we don't want feelings. We want this to be more, almost speaking to you, more data driven. Give us the numbers. Why would this project score higher than that one? So again, I'll maybe just stop there unless there's any other questions, but there weren't a whole lot of changes, but that is something that I wanted to get on your radar again, better defining that process this year.
Mr. Smith looked at me first, Mr. Ballard. One, you'll be next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick proposal for you, Mr. Hood. As much as I'm sure the data-driven nature is music to Mr. Lancaster's ears, the consistent involvement is music to mine. I chair the prioritization subcommittee. And it's something we had kind of discussed with Miranda last year about potentially doing, but given kind of some of the changes and stuff, I don't know if we were ever able to get around to that. So I would just offer if you're looking to involve the commission on more of a consistent basis, assuming the rest of the body is amenable to it, something like a more consistent subcommittee meeting might be helpful with a report back to the greater commission to save some time on the behalf of the group as well.
Mr. Ballard.
Mr. Chairman, so I think Mr. Lancaster would ask this question, so I'll beat him to the punch. Mr. Hood, unless you can measure it, you can't manage it. So my question is, what data, what information would be coming to us? For instance, let's take bicycles. And I see the sign out here that says bicycle friendly city. But I look and I say, well, how many bicycles do I see in a day? Now, it's a great facility, same way with pathways and their amenities. But where would we get some measurement? I don't know if the police gets this, the school gets this, but somebody calling in to say, geez, be nice. How do we measure that? And on your comments, you go, well, it's kind of a feel good. Well, you can't measure feel good. I'm just kind of curious what we would have to make.
So, Mr. Chair, I guess I will answer your question by posing another one, and maybe this gets vetted through the subcommittee. But I would start back at what information data are you seeking, and we'll see if we have it. And if we don't, can we get it? So what are those things if it's bicycle counts that you're interested in or the group's interested to score,
Right.
we can find out what exists. And if they don't, then we can ask Compass. They have some counters. We can maybe get that. I won't guarantee that, but let's start with what data do you think you need? And let's see if we have that or not. And then if not, we can potentially gather it.
Right, and there would be a source, and I can't speak for her, but Sergeant, and
Mhm.
maybe there are some statistics, and I'm just, this is hypothetical. How many bicycle incidents are there? But I don't know if that's counted someplace.
Mhm.
But, so I think if we put our mind to it, we'll ask for, what sources of information out there, maybe ACHD, I don't know. I'm just thinking, what book do we open up to see the numbers?
Mr. Chair, I won't get into that now, but there are different folks that collect that type of information through the police department, through the state police. There are databases where that information is gathered and we can share. Just to use that example some more on bicycle pedestrian crashes, some of that data does exist.
All right, good, thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Did I
Chair.
cover it, Mr. Lancaster?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Only follow-up question to that, and at risk of trying as hard as I can not to derail this into a larger conversation about a different subject. Are there any interagency databases of this information at all, or is this going to be kind of a goose chase for some of these metrics?
Commissioner Smith, Mr. Chair, it's called WebCars. It's a database that is maintained by the Idaho Transportation Department, Office of Highway Safety. Generally, they're anywhere between 3 to 9 months in arrears as they get the police data and load it into the system. And ACHD has access to it, but if we want data to be able to be released, we cannot do that. The data has to be provided by ITD because they are the holders of the data, and that's the agreement that we have with them. But one important thing to remember, only accidents that are reported go into the database. Near misses, problems that people perceive, or non-reported accidents never happen because the data doesn't get in there. So just something to consider, sir.
Good, carry on.
Just a couple more. I know I need to get Ryan going here so he can get back to another meeting he has, but so the other, I think there's 2 other ones I wanted to highlight, just a quick update. And it's bolded for you there, still on page 6, is the Linda Road Overland to Franklin, which includes the overpass of I-84. So public meetings are expected to begin March 16th and be open for 2 weeks. So that's an online public information process. There are some meetings with stakeholders that'll happen during that 2 weeks that the online information is available. But again, so starting March 16th, you can go to ACHD's website, check out all the exhibits if you're curious about what it currently looks like, provide any comments you may want on that project. So again, kind of tying that in with the first one, that was our highest priority project for this year. So if you all want to look at that, maybe even participate in the public involvement process, that is going to be opening up here shortly. And then I think there was one more I wanted to highlight, actually 2. So Amity Road and Locust Grove, I'll only say there's more information. So page 8, there's more information in the staff communications on that. So I won't dwell on that here. But if you didn't get a chance to look at your packet, you can go to staff communications, and I'll maybe even touch on that a little bit later. And then I did receive a correspondence from ITD after the packet went out. So I'm just going to read that. So on page 9 are our ITD related updates. We will add for next month the Interstate 84 eastbound Meridian interchange to Eagle interchange into the packet. But let me just read the update that I received from ITD a week or so ago. This project will produce a PS&E, so plan specifications and estimates package, for adding a second on-ramp lane eastbound at the Meridian interchange, an auxiliary or a 5th lane between Meridian interchange to Eagle interchange, and a second off-ramp lane at Eagle interchange. The construction phase for this project has not yet been programmed. Work has commenced on survey, utilities, drainage, and environmental. So don't expect you to memorize that. Again, we'll put that in the packet, but wanted to let you know in the state did provide that update. So with that, Mr. Chair, I think those are the ones I wanted to call to your attention. I will stand for any questions though on anything I didn't highlight or if we need to double back on anything that you all may want to discuss.
One item on that I have is at the bottom of page 9, the Highway 16 extension from 2026 to I-84. I went to a neighborhood meeting ITD held on that a week or two ago and posed the direct question about what is the status of the middle segment of that work. You will remember that they started with the north and south ends. The middle was to follow. I was told, I'm not sure it was official, but I was told that they are hung up on a right-of-way acquisition situation in that stretch. Apparently, it didn't go as quickly as they thought, so it's hung. It will get resolved, just a matter of time, I'm sure. That's all I've got. Anyone have any questions or other comments about the update? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hood. Mr. Ryan Head is here today from ACHD. He's going to talk about what you've seen in the news about ACHD's crosswalk initiative. When I saw that, I asked staff to see if someone could come from ACHD and explain it to us. And the floor is yours, sir.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission. My name is Ryan Head. I'm the Deputy Director of Development and Technical Services for Ada County Highway District. It's been a hot minute since I've been here as well. So, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you more information on our Let's Get There Safely signalization project. This is Let's Get There Safely is a campaign of a number of safety efforts that ACHD is making. Really, safety is always our top focus. But there are some specific projects and efforts that have been made. One of those is the expansion of an effort that ACHD's previously started, but that's to expand the use of our leading pedestrian interval to all signalized intersections in the county. And so what is a leading pedestrian interval? This is a phase added to the signal timing when all lights will be red and the pedestrian has 3 to 7 seconds of a head start to begin their crossing before the green light happens for the vehicles going in that same direction. So really it gives just a little bit of a head start to increase visibility of the pedestrian so that they're able to be seen. And so some of the benefits of that
The committee would like to meet again in April, on the 3rd of April. And we're going to be requesting more data from our good staff people. And what we want to find out is, and it sounds like they have to approach ITD if they have all this accident data. Right? And if it's a little old, that's okay, because I think we've got other communities. What we want to compare is other communities' speed limit with lower speed limits if their per capita crashes or incidents, reported accidents have gone up or down since they've made those changes. We want to find out if lowering the speed limit has some empirical value, that we can see. We can see in data from other communities, and then see if that makes sense to implement here in Meridian. So there's more to it than that, and I'm gonna have a detailed sort of request of the data we'd like to see when I submit that to Miranda for the meeting. So we'll do that in the next few days. The other items we had on the agenda, I am on the Destination Downtown Parking Subcommittee. And they've not yet met. They will meet in April and in May. And I'll have other reports on those meetings well. We have some interest, I think, in reviewing our parking ordinances for the city. And if the MDC is looking at that issue anyway, it might be good to gather their thoughts as we go along. So we might, as a future topic for our subcommittee, we may come back to parking, but I need to find out what urban renewal folks are planning and what their goals are on downtown parking. I think that'll be really good to know. So be pursuing that. And the other update we had was from Zach Shoemaker, our commissioner on our subcommittee. And he distributed some notes he had, but we also have, all the commissioners have the notes in the packet regarding the intersection and pedestrian safety task force update. And so that's already in our minutes. So I urge you to look at that. And Zach will have other updates for us as we go along as well. And all I have for our meeting, we'll have some more work on speed limits, and we'll have these other irons in the fire where we'll have updates.
Any questions for Mr. Leclerc? Mr. Lancaster?
Mr. Chairman, I do. It's not necessarily for Mr. Leclerc, though. Commissioner Leclerc. So I can ask a question of Sergeant Smith. So here's your indoctrination to, or introduction to being asked questions cold.
I wonder it could happen.
Yeah, you did.
I just didn't tell her who.
And recognizing that this is a new job for you, but how much data can we expect from crash reports? Reported crashes in, in residential streets and residential streets. How many police reports, are generally generated in those sorts of environments? I imagine that most crashes that are reported are happening at intersections and arterials and that sort of thing, but I'm interested in the police perspective there.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Lancaster, that's my experience. Is it's very rare that it's happening inside subdivisions. It's usually our main arterials and our larger intersections, entryways, driveways and stuff to those main arterials. We do have some of those crashes in residential areas, but I would say, cold, that would be a pretty small number of our crashes.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Leclerc. So, well, I appreciate the collection of data, and I'm all for that all the time. I think, I guess my advice to your subcommittee is you may have to recognize that the data may only be kind of helpful. So,
Okay,
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD.
Mr. Lawson.
My experience has been with over 22 years at the district is most of the crashes that occur interior to subdivisions are backing crashes and excessive speed for conditions. So typically it's snow and ice on the ground and somebody's doing 17 miles an hour in a 25 zone. They don't maintain, but the police are able to cite because they were going faster than the conditions were. And then the third type, and I hate to mention that, is parents and family members backing over children in the driveway. Those are the three common types in neighborhoods that I have seen over the past 20 years. What we have our traffic calming policy, and everybody's aware that we do install speed humps and traffic calming devices at times. The criteria is the same for Meridian as it is for Boise, as it is for Star. So we use the same criteria, and we don't see a whole lot of difference in speeds between Star, Meridian, and Boise. People are not driving the number on the speed limit sign. People are driving how they feel the road conditions are and how the road feels for them. So you will have somebody in a subdivision driving 45 miles an hour on a 25 road, and you'll have a whole lot of people driving 17 to 22 in a 20 mile an hour zone.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
While I have you here, and this is something that the subcommittee we might do in a future meeting, but just figured while we're here and while we talked about this webcars database, also for MPD, I think some of the discussion was had around specifically, the assumption is that the underreporting of, for example, neighborhood crashes, it's a pretty consistent behavior across cities. In the Treasure Valley, it seems, behaviors tend to be the same. So it's a question more of, does, when controlling for all these other things that seem to be pretty consistent, does the variable of, posted speed limit change the things like whether there are injuries in a crash in residential areas, that, whether there's a fatality and things like that. Do you know, or MPD, do you have information on if those are available in a database, if there's some ability to reference that against the speed limit of the road that it's on, et cetera? Just for discussion.
Let me add a little bit more to the question. Our belief is, and you can, Mr. Watson, you certainly correct us, is that Meridian is the only incorporated city in Ada County with a 25 neighborhood speed limit. The others are all 20. Is that correct or not?
Mr. Chair, that is incorrect.
What is the case?
Eagle is posted 25 miles an hour prima facie. Garden City's prima facie speed limit is 25, although the city council wants it to be 20. And there are a number of local residential streets in the city that are posted for 20. But they have not yet codified an ordinance for 25. Star is 20 miles an hour, and I believe Kuhn is 20. The county, by agreement with Ada County Sheriff, is 25 in residential subdivisions. We had a meeting with them, had to be 22, 23 years ago when I first got here. And if we follow state code, the speed limit in the subdivisions would be 35 miles an hour. And Ada County Sheriff and us agreed that that was a little bit excessive. And so we agreed by convention that we would post residential streets in unincorporated Ada County for 25 miles an hour,
And Boise is 20 in neighborhoods?
and has been 20 since Christ was a corporal.
Speaking of rank, Sergeant, do you have an answer to the question that you may have lost by now? But anyway,
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioner Smith. Not quite sure I understood your question, but you were looking for, does the lower speeds have a lower injury crash rate?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, that is part of the question. Specifically, we're looking for, or we're considering looking for, it's kind of still an early conversation. But those kinds of data, those kinds of incidents compared specifically against the speed limit of the street of where they took place. I'm just curious if whether in I want to say net cars, web cars, or in MPD's database, if there's that kind of data available, those variables to compare.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Smith, I'm actually just not sure about that at this time.
Mr. Smith, Commissioner Smith, Mr. Chair, we'd have to go and pull the crashes and pull the fatalities and then compare them with the narratives as to whether speed was the primary or a contributing factor. It would take some staff time to do, but it wouldn't take an inordinate amount of time because, quite honestly, we don't have that many fatalities in neighborhoods. I mean, we have them, but they're for the grace of God, we don't have a heck of a lot of them.
Sure. That would be great to see. And beyond fatalities, and to hopefully clarify a little bit, in my head, I'm imagining, if a crash is a row in a spreadsheet, the various columns are there, is there injury beyond just fatality? Is there injury requiring medical assistance? Are there, things like that? In a perfect world, to be able to have all this data, and I know that you probably don't know all that off the top of your head, but I would love to, if there's that available, or if we were able to investigate that. And I don't want to speak for the subcommittee as a whole, but I think that might be helpful and fruitful for future conversations for the subcommittee.
Commissioner Smith, Mr. Chair, there are 4 classifications, and if I'm wrong, Ryan, please correct me. There are 4 classifications of crashes. First is PDO, property damage only. Second is a type C crash, no injuries, or very, very minor injuries. Second are type B, where it's possible they're going to have to go to the hospital. Type A, they've gone to the hospital. And then the last one is your fatality. Now, if we start looking at all of the crashes to try to track that down, there's probably not enough staff time this year to get that taken care of. So we would have to pick and choose the fight that we want to, because are we talking just Meridian? Are we talking countywide? Or, we have to look at what type of data we're collecting.
Just to put hopefully a little better definition on what we think we're asking without having asked it yet. The subcommittee was asked to look at lowering the speed limit in Meridian from 25 to 20 in the neighborhoods. As a general thought, the committee said, would it make a difference? Is there any data out there that can tell us, would it make a difference in terms of safety? Because as I keep saying, and nobody's told me I'm wrong, any parent with a child on the sidewalk in front of the house thinks the last car that went by was doing 60 miles an hour. So rather than just jump off and decide, no, we don't want to recommend it, or yes, we do want to recommend it, we were more interested in, is there any data to help us talk about it further whether we can come to some kind of conclusion to make a recommendation or not. We don't want to work this to death today, but that's just, so you'll know that's kind of what the thinking was, and the idea that you have some data, but there's a limited amount of time on the clock to research it too deeply. We'll continue to think about it. Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir, Mr. Ballard.
random thought. I would think that we would want to have legal counsel maybe consider this question. I don't know if reports that are generated, say, for the police department, I don't know this, but I'm thinking if they have weighed in on factors that cause the crash, do they unwittingly become an expert witness in civil litigation because there's a report out there that said causal factor for that? So that's where we come in with legal counsel to say what information may be available and what are the sideboards on that, if any. I'm thinking public public records request. It becomes a question, what information would be there or what's the disclaimer and what are the uses of it? I don't know. It's just, like I say, random thought.
Mr. Chair.
Do you wish to take that as a question or just a thought for the future?
Well, I could tell him for sure that there are public records requests that are available from the police department. If it was a closed case, there may be some information that would be available. If it's an open case, there wouldn't be any information.
Okay, let's move ahead with Mr. Hood to report on the intersection and pedestrian task force, which is a safety-based, I understand, task force. And I'm going to start with a question, Mr. Hood, if I may. If there are 457 signalized intersections in Ada County, how many are there in Meridian?
Wow, Mr. Chair, good question. I can ballpark that. There's roughly 65.
Okay, thank you.
Miranda is trying to get a better handle on that, but that's approximately how many we are going to site check over the next few months. So,
Okay.
So to kind of do the intro, there was this, and this all sort of ties into the last conversation we had and when Ryan was here. So there is some overlap and maybe even a theme today of safety. I don't know, maybe that's every month, but this month in particular, this group was established fairly recently because of some fatalities that happened at intersections. And so the elected officials said, we need to do something together about this and talk about this some more. And so Miranda has worked to coordinate a group. You can see on page 13 of your packet, the members. So Commissioner Shoemaker does represent to some degree, and I'm not putting weight on his shoulders, maybe that doesn't belong, but he is your member on this group. There was a kickoff meeting on February 9th. The task force, and I'm going to paraphrase again, I'll let you read everything we're tasked with doing, but the task force is going to look specifically at pedestrian safety and at major intersections and pedestrian crossings, particularly around schools. But the mayor does want us to look at all, Mr. Chair, back to your first question, all intersections, whether they be full signals or pedestrian signals on the arterial roadway network. Quite honestly, there's only one that we could identify on a collector roadway. So that makes it pretty easy. We're staying on the main roadways. We're not getting off of those major corridors, except for at Stoddard Road. There is one near Victory Middle School. But everything else is largely on their arterial roads. We are enlisting the help of our police department to help with some of that evaluation. We're largely done with the short-term actions that are at the bottom of page 13 and then moving towards some of the medium-term actions. And again, some of the work corresponds to what Mr. Head was talking to you about earlier. So they're already implementing some of the LPI stuff as this group is meeting and gathering data. So again, I'm not trying to play up to Mr. Lancaster's love of data, but that is really where we're starting. We're trying to figure out which intersections are most important? Where do we have the crashes? Where have we got the phone calls? Let's look at those first, but we are going to look at all intersections along arterials, particularly in our schools. So again, the first few bullets there, this, what we're calling a safety audit at signal arterial intersections. The template, so maybe it's a little bit out of, but kind of the vision is just even like a 1-page cut sheet of what's going on there. So is it a 3x5? Is it a 5x5? Is it 7x7? Are there ADA crosswalks? Is there an audible pedestrian? So it's just kind of an existing condition. And then is it planned to be improved? Is it already in ACHD CIP to be built and widened, or is it already to its ultimate? So kind of what's going on there is a snapshot where you can turn to this sheet and it tells you kind of, this is Victory Locust Grove and what the existing condition is. Oh, it's going into construction. Have there been any crashes there within a quarter mile where near a school is? So it kind of gives you a snapshot. So we'll create this booklet with basically, I'm hoping it's just front, but it may be front and back with some basic information about what is going on at that intersection. So that's kind of the big thing to then go, okay, well, what are some of these common denominators, if there are any? I won't read again through all the detailed scope and the long-term actions, but some of what we're hoping is to maybe even influence some of the best practices at ACHD, but also help in what Ryan was trying to determine is where should they be expending their resources first? If there are, again, a history of crashes, like I think Mr. Watson pointed out, near misses, we don't necessarily have a report all at, but sometimes we do. So some of the process that this group will do to gather that information is to talk with administration at schools. Where are they getting the complaints from? Even the kids at the schools. Hey, where do you not feel safe crossing roads? And just try to gather some of that. So we don't exactly know what the public outreach is going to look like right now, but there is going to be some of that, boots on the ground and try to understand from the people that are there near these intersections, how's it working for them? So again, there's multiple pages here. We will have another meeting coming up soon. ACHD is kind of doing a lot of this reconnaissance, if you will. Our police department has been, the chief and the mayor talking about that, and we're trying to figure out kind of, again, how we get out there and what are we documenting when people are out there, but we're moving towards, excuse me, some of that. So that's a pretty brief, high-level summary, but there's a lot of information there. I can try to answer questions. I'm part of this group, but Miranda is leading it. So be nice to me if you ask me any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Could we have this item on the monthly agenda until such time as it concludes, just to keep us appraised on how it's coming and what they're doing and so forth? Someone, yes, sir.
Mr. Hood, as I was listening today and I read through this task force and stuff, right now in this city, I am almost scared to pull out from a green light because people are crowding intersections, running red lights. We're talking about adding time for a pedestrian to cross. And right now people aren't obeying the red light, green light in the first place. So you're like, well, maybe we should enforce what we got and get that to stop and get the behavior changes. Because I can't imagine being a pedestrian and running out as soon as the light turns. Are you guys looking at that? In crowding intersections, there's people sitting on a red light in the intersection because they kept going and they can't clear the intersection away.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, to answer your question directly, no. I mean, so to influence motorist behavior that way, I mean, some of it, there's the E's, right? The education and the enforcement probably being some of the bigger ones. The enforcement piece will let, police figure that out. So again, that isn't necessarily in the scope here. We aren't telling the police department how to do their job necessarily or where to patrol. Yeah, I don't know if there's a better answer for you. And I don't really even so I answered your question. I don't have a good answer for you on that. And I don't know that you're even thinking I will. But no, that isn't within the scope of this group, is to, What I do want to say though, that isn't necessarily your question, and Ryan answered it, but he didn't answer it directly. I don't think too many of our intersections will have the, it will be a button to activate the LPI for them. Again, that doesn't help the red light runners. I tell my kids, just because you have a green doesn't mean you get to go. Please look both ways,
Yeah.
right? What we are trying to avoid hopefully is some of the right hooks or, some of the lefts where you don't see the pedestrian. So it gives them a head start to be out, and sounds kind of weird, but it gives them a chance to get out in the intersection to be seen, not just step off the curb and now you get hit. But you still got to look. I mean, as a pedestrian, you don't take on a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pound vehicle, right? You be aware of your surroundings now, right? So there's a lot to that, but that is not within necessarily the scope of this group.
Thanks.
Any other questions on the intersection task force? Thank you. Okay, next item is staff communications. Mr. Hood, we apparently, I think Miranda saved these up for you because you've got more on
There are
today
quite a
than
few.
we've had in months.
Yeah. There are quite a few, but we got 45 minutes, right, before we have to extend, and we'll try to get under that. Okay, so Mr. Chair, we're going to start on page 17. She was looking for some feedback, so I can take some notes on this. I'm going to put Mr. Wasson on the spot a little bit on some of this since he's had at least a little bit of time to start to look at these. We didn't coordinate before this meeting, so I apologize. This may be a little, it is definitely uncoordinated, but I'm comfortable putting him on the spot. So you do have kind of 4 requests within the first one in Pheasant Point. So Miranda has done a pretty good job of highlighting those again in the second one. So, well, let me just start with the first one. And John, if you're okay, maybe we'll just take these one by one. And if you have an update, great. If not, that's a fair answer too, because you haven't had it on your plate for very long. So the first one is you stick between Meridian and Eagle. And again, I can pull this up if people want to look at the corridor. I have Google Earth up, but the speed limit is 40. And this person would like to see the speed limit lowered to 35.
Mr. Chair, Caleb, that is being evaluated by Josh Sack at this point in time. I don't know what the results are, but I would not hold out a lot of hope for a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit on a 5-lane arterial road.
Okay. So again, and maybe this is a common theme throughout this one, when we have Mr. Sack or whoever is going to report out, we'll definitely make sure that that's on your agenda, either in old business or project updates, or if it warrants to be an agenda item. I know this individual was not able to be with us today. She may be able to attend a future meeting, kind of depending. I know she was going to watch this. We record them on YouTube, so she can track along. And if we need to follow up, then we certainly will. So, but we'll report out as we get those updates. So the second one then, and again, this is kind of a 2-parter. Locust Grove between Fairview and Chinden, the speed limit's 40. So here's kind of the 2-part question. So lowering the speed limit potentially to 25 or 30 was the request. And then part 2 of that stretch is lighting. And I don't know that's so much ACHD, but if Mr. Wasson, if you have any update on either one of those, we'll take it.
We are evaluating the Locust Grove. Quite honestly, I don't think 25 has any chance of happening. It's possible a 35 might, but if we start lowering that corridor, then we have to start looking at all of the other north-south corridors for consistency. But Josh is looking at that. If we have intersection lighting that needs to be evaluated and looked at, we would certainly do that. It's the city's responsibility though for street lighting. So the city would have to pop on board and probably take a look at some of the just general street lighting up and down the road. And that again is a dual-edged sword, because some people want more light on the street, and then other people have never heard of using curtains in their house.
So Mr. Chair, and again, Miranda was asking for feedback. So if you have any, we'll take it, or if you want to wait until ACHD is done with their review, and then we can have more discussion, I think that's appropriate as well. So either way, I will just quickly on the lighting piece of that. So I am part of the project team that's looking at the improvements at the intersection of Locust Grove and Fairview, and then the roadway widening between Eagle and Jericho on Fairview Avenue. So that's basically between Eagle Road and about a quarter to a third of a mile west of Locust Grove. And the project also goes north so in this section, north about a quarter of a mile too, there's a Signalot Chateau. So basically the scope of that project goes up to right about that intersection. And we're looking at least lighting that first part with ACHD's roadway project and intersection project. That's typically how a lot of the roadways in Meridian get lit, is with a capital project at ACHD. We do some retrofitting that's particularly usually within our downtown kind of older neighborhoods, more than, again, independent arterial lighting projects just don't happen that often. But anyway, just a quick update there, that if and as Locust Grove, for example, gets designed and into right away, we look at lighting the corridors. So again, you're talking about a 2 or 3 lane facility now in this stretch. So there's not a lot of lighting today. And then the third request is cut through. So this is Yellow Peak and Stormy. So this is near the Ustick Locust Grove. So again, same kind of neck of the woods. And again, I'll ask Mr. Wasson if he's.
I have not seen that, Mr. Chair. We did evaluate Stormy about 3 years ago, and it did not meet the criteria for traffic calming. I would not anticipate Yellow Peak being any different. I'll have to follow up with David Peterson in my office to see if he's handling that request.
A general question for you, if I may, Mr. Wasson. I have seen speed bumps, speed humps, tables in Boise. I apparently don't drive the right places in Meridian to see any, not without naming them. Are there some in Meridian?
Yes, sir, there definitely are.
Okay.
And-
Other than in front of Costco and Albertson.
Yes, sir. Well, now, words have meaning. So speed bumps, we don't have any in the inventory. Those are parking lot devices to keep you 5 miles an hour or so. Then you have speed humps. Our standard speed hump is edge of pavement to edge of pavement, 3.5 inches high by 12 feet broad. And they're of a parabolic nature. Then there are speed tables. The only difference is those are 22 feet across. The profile is still the same other than that. And those were used on collector roads. We have now gone to speed cushions or speed lumps, and those have wheel cuts in the middle of them to allow mostly unrestricted travel for emergency services, primarily fire engines, because although firefighters hardly ever work, just ask Meridian Police Department or any other police department. And I say that in jest, but they have a totally different suspension system. They still use a leaf suspension system for their rear end because of all the water they carry. So on a speed hump, the fire truck has to slow almost to a complete stop to negotiate that and then accelerate to the next one. So we've worked with a PE in the Boise Police Department and developed speed lumps or speed cushions. So the truck drives right down the middle of it. And if you were to go to Gable, you would see some out on Gable off of Meridian Road. We've gotten some complaints from the neighborhood saying that they're not effective. They're not slowing people down. That's not what the data tells us. The data tells us that the speeds are being reduced by 7 to 11%. Volumes aren't being changed at all. And in this case, we didn't want volumes changed. But the speeds are down 2 to 4 miles an hour along that corridor.
Okay, Mr. Hood, carry on.
So again, as we move to the next item, we'll bring that likely next month on the agenda then.
Okay.
So moving on to page 18, 10 Mile and Cherry. Mr. Walters' concerns there. Let's see, I think actually if you go to page 19, it kind of summarizes the request. I think Miranda did a good job of, and then actually created an exhibit. So he's got concerns with the left turns out of the Albertsons onto Cherry Lane. So if you're northbound coming out of Albertsons, heading westbound onto Cherry Lane, crossing that traffic. So there's a McDonald's, there's a driveway. In fact, I think there's a couple of driveways in that area, but if you look at the exhibit in your packet, there's a kind of mid Albertsons or mid development access point near 10 Mile Road that there have been some crashes at. And they got some concern with, again, the left turn out from Albertsons onto westbound Cherry. And then part two would be on the other side of the complex. So out on 10 Mile Road, looking at that access point that basically goes right in front of Albertsons, and then restricting that potentially with the median there. So again, Miranda's asking you to discuss, provide feedback. I don't know if Mr. Wasson has looked at this or has an update as well. I'm not even sure that this one we sent to you ahead of time. So
I had asked both Mr. Wasson and MPD if they had, and this was last Friday that I asked for it. I was surprised. I think we do have something from the MPD on intersection crashes and a block each way, west and south from that intersection. Sergeant?
Yes,
you-
Mr. Chair.
Do you have anything worth sharing?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Corporal Goodspeed was able to look up that data for you that you requested. It looks like he went back 5 years. So January 1st of 2018 to current as of last Friday. Just at the intersection itself at Cherry and 10 Mile, we've had 31 crashes in that 5-year time frame. During that same period, so at the Albertsons, there at Sugar Creek, so where you're turning left onto Cherry, we've had 3 crashes there in 5 years. And then south of the intersection, so what would be at 10 Mile and West Sherrill Drive, in that same time period, we've had 3 crashes.
Mr. Lancaster, I love data. 3 and 5 years at each more or less intermediate block point.
Question there, Mr. Chair?
There's not. Mr. Watson, do you have
Mr.
any other?
Chair, John
other
Watson,
comments?
Ada County Highway District.
Any other comments on this situation?
Yes, sir. The Albertsons complex has 3 access points to it, 1 on 10 Mile and 2 on Cherry. The access onto 10 Mile is right in, right out, left in. Left outs are restricted by both signage and candles. So you could do it, but you're not supposed to. And since this is Wasson land, I don't see a whole lot of people making left turns out of that driveway. There are 2 access points on Cherry, one by the McDonald's and one center of mass for the parking lot. The one center of mass is left out, right out, and in. And I suppose the left out or right, and there's a car there, so I can't really see it. But one of those allows for just straight crossing Cherry Lane. That's approximately 325 feet west of the 10 Mile interchange. And at this point, under today's convention, we would not allow that to take place.
What would you allow?
It would be right in, right out, left in, but not a left out. So you couldn't make a left turn and go westbound on Cherry.
Whoa, you lost me. Say it again, please.
You could go right in, right out, and left in, but you couldn't go left out of the parking lot and go west on Cherry.
Got it.
Now, remember, this development went in almost 20 years ago, so times have changed. If you, and Sugar Creek is the street to the north. The individual lives somewhere in that complex. The next access point is the McDonald's parking lot. That is tight. Plus, you've also got their Dipsy dumpster garbage thing that allows about 21 feet of access. And then you also have to deal with stacking from the drive-through, backing up and causing issues in and out of there. If you go a little bit further to the west, you come to Lauderhill. And Lauderhill is a signalized intersection which allows Sugar Creek to actually use that signal to get out, to make left out if we were to implement a full closure out there to restrict it to a right in, right out, because if we do that, it's going to affect Sugar Creek. Josh is working on this one. He started working on it last week. I don't know where he is right now. We are going to have to look at the development application to see if we put anything in the development app that said, based upon safety factors, crash history, whatnot, ACHD has the right to just go in there and restrict access.
You're talking about Sugar Creek.
The Sugar Creek, yes, sir. Because if we don't, we could end up in a tort claim for business damages with that company. Because that would have an impact on that parcel.
Mr. Hood?
Moving right along.
Well, anybody else, any comments, questions on this particular one? It's an extremely developed question.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
My only question, using my newfound terminology, newly learned terminology from Mr. Wasson, would be, of those crashes in that 5-year period, how many of them are, do you know how many are property damage only, the different classes, fatalities?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Smith, I don't have that data in these numbers.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Smith, I believe there has been a fatality at Cherry and 10 Mile about, I want to say 3 years ago, where a gentleman ran a signal and hit a left turner going from westbound to southbound on 10 Mile. And I believe that resulted in a fatality. That's the only fatality I'm aware of at that location.
One more question for the sergeant is, what's your feeling for 31 crashes in 5 years at that particular intersection? Is that for Meridian? Is that high, low, about what we expect? Is that, I don't have any feeling for it. 31 strikes me as a pretty good number.
Mr. Chair, my personal feeling is it's on the lower side. I mean, we've got Eagle Road that gives us much larger numbers, I guess, if you're going to compare to corridors that we have. Over a 5-year period, 3 crashes in those other areas, that's not significant to us necessarily.
So in this case, Cherry Lane and 10 Mile, the intersection itself is about kind of business as usual. It happens.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Not to say we want 31, but yes, sir.
kind of opened up a question there of what are some thinking about this area? And does it, you say it's a complicated question, so bear with me here a minute. When I was a lad, there were 16,000 people in Boise. Now you're approaching 500,000. It's a numbers game. You're older than I thought. That's seven growth rings on the tree. So, in what I'm hearing from the commissioners, I've been here maybe 10 years. Mr. Lancaster has a few more gray hairs. But as we look at this, the Transportation Commission, no one has a crystal ball. Mr. Wasson said the development plans 20 years ago didn't anticipate this. But as this community grows, these are new problems. I hear Mr. Hopkins and I share his concern about people running the red light. So as we talk about these things in the Transportation Commission, what is it that we can solve? What can we bring? Because these are developing, emerging issues. And I think it displays, I heard a comment a few minutes ago about changing behavior. I have to ask the person that wants to stop on Cherry Lane to turn into McDonald's, and I'm not faulting them, but that blocks traffic. Why choke that lane up? I don't know. So there's a lot of questions as we grow, as we develop, new problems emerge that we didn't see because we didn't have a crystal ball 20 years ago. So I'm kind of curious what, and I'm reading through this packet here and says, be interesting to see what the Transportation Commission says on this one problem. We haven't even gotten to that part of the letter yet. So maybe this is editorial, but I'm looking at it and there's present company excluded. There's some pretty smart people up here. And we're not talking about some solutions here. And I don't know who looks at traffic as a whole. Ada County Highway District, they have a huge task. Police Department, they have a huge task. They're seeing things differently and there's different solutions. So complicated problem. And we play just a little part, but so far we haven't been asked to solve anything for this or weigh in on it. I'm just kind of curious what we're doing here then.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can, I know that was a question, and I think some of these, again, we're in staff communication. So as we get more data, we'll bring them, and this is likely a topic of discussion for potential action, I guess, next month after we hear what ACHD says on some of these things, and maybe if there's more data to gather from police or whatever information you may need. So this is kind of a getting you ready for maybe more of a discussion once ACHD says, yep, no problem, or yeah, we'd like to put a median in or whatever through some of their evaluations. So if you have feedback, I'll take it today, but these aren't necessarily action items. It is more, these are things we've received via email, phone calls through the mayor's office, whatever, over the last 30 days or so. And we're just starting to understand kind of the request.
And that wasn't cynicism or a critique, Mr. Hood. I'm just looking at, as I hear some comments from my fellow commissioners, in our task, I'm asking myself, what are we asked to be? I'm just saying, what are we looking at? How can we contribute? I'm not a traffic guy. I know a little bit about litigation, but that's not why I'm here. I just look to solve a problem if I think I know an answer. Yep. Thank you.
Good.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, so I'm still on page 20 then, or I guess moving to page 20. Eagle Road speed limit. So this has been one that's been discussed, and I don't really have much of an update, just to say that we did have a meeting last week with ITD. City of Boise was there, Eagle was there, ISP was present. I know ITD is still trying to figure out what, if any, recommendations they're going to have, or what the report out to council looks like. So I will just reiterate the information that is in your packet, that sometime at this point, probably late March is probably a pretty good guesstimate. I haven't heard from Mr. Lakey at ITD. I know Mr. Price was part of that conversation, the internal meeting that we had. Again, I don't expect him to say anything more, but if he has anything he wants to add, certainly I'll pause for a second if he has anything. But again, I'll let the information there stand. And then once we hear from ITD, how they're going to report that out to council, we can follow up. And again, that may likely be April or May or something like that. But ITD is planning to come back to council here within the next few weeks.
Mr. Price, do you have anything to add?
Nope, nothing to add. That's a good report, Caleb. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then same with the next one that says that maybe we discuss this more on April 1st. But again, John, I don't know if you have any update at this point in time, but this is again, Blue Heron, Meridian Road, traffic signal. Again, it says maybe by April 1st. So we're only in March, but
Mr. Chair, as I said, we're in the process of getting that gathered. I've submitted the request about a month and a half ago. We're just waiting on a couple of good days of weather so that the hoses don't get swept up by a plow. That does happen, by the way. So once we get it, the evaluation should not take a lot of time. So I would anticipate the results back by 1 April.
Thank you, sir.
So then the next one is, again, I alluded to this in the project updates memo. There's the high level update of where the project stands. This is kind of the rest of the story, if you will. So recent conversations with elected officials about the design of that. So I'm not going to go into a lot of this. This is just so you all know that, you know, this correspondence did get sent from the city to ACHD. Some of the residents and other stakeholders in that area have contacted the city and ACHD about the design of the Amity Locust Grove Road. So again, there's multiple pages in your packet. I'll let you read them. And if you've already read them and have questions, we can do that. But this is, again, just to keep you in the loop of what's going on. And if we need to talk more, we can. So
A question about the chart, graph, picture, whatever it is on page 23.
Mhm.
How is that developed? I've never seen something like that. I mean, I've been on transportation commissions where you put students out on street corners reading license plates and compare them with the license plates on the other side of town. And you sit down and figure out who's going which way. But I don't think they did this that way.
So, Mr. Chair, I can answer that, and hopefully you don't want to get too technical on this. Brian McClure in my office is the one that creates this, but it's based on ACS, American Community Survey information through the U.S. Census Department, and commute patterns. And so that does get graphed, and he can
Oh, he census
can
data
extrapolate.
and what?
The ACS, so it supplements the DICE every 10 years, dicentennial, whatever every 10-year census information.
Right.
There's the ACS data. And so a lot of that has commute patterns and vehicle information that we have access to through the US Census. And he can, again, I don't know how he actually does it, but there's tables and tables of information, and he made this.
However he does it, I'm impressed. Mr. Lancaster, I think you may have a question.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. So at the bottom of page 20, the introduction of this topic, it says, following staff concerns, and comma, city council sent the attached letters. So it sounds as if, so that sentence leads me to believe that city staff initiated this letter. And if so, I'm curious, were the concerns what are expressed in the letter? I guess that's my first question. I'll stop there for that answer. I guess that's a question for Caleb, since you're your staff.
So here is I'm not trying to make this short necessarily, but I want it to be succinct so you understand kind of what's going on. So there's multiple concerns that the city raised to ACHD in this. Kind of the punchline is the actual design that they're leaning towards as of the moment. For me, some of the almost as big of a concern as how we got here, and that being we were not involved in the process. ACHD designed this and said, here you go, this is the intersection we're going forward with. So staff's concern was, hey, how come we're just hearing about this? This wasn't the last design. When we push pause on this project, this was not how this looked. And now you're giving us this design. And so that's the main concern that we raised to council is we're blindsided by this. And by the way, we don't like the design. And so I think maybe to answer your question before you get there, we would have brought this to you, but we didn't, when we weren't involved, to bring it to you to know what it was. And then it was like, we have to get something to ACHD before this gets even further down the road. So we are looping you in. And like I said, we can talk about this some more. But this has come about in the past few weeks to say, here's where we're at with, I can't remember if this is at 30 or 75 or what, 50 even, I can't remember what percent we're at, but it's a totally different design than where we left the project in the last project manager. So again, multiple concerns, but coordination and communication, and then the actual status of the design and where it seems to be heading.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So Caleb, that helps. Thank you. Has there been any response received from this?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lancaster, not that I know of. We did have the joint meeting on the 23rd, and I do know ACHD was in receive the letter, but it was pretty fresh for them when we met. So maybe there's been communication, but I am not aware of any response from ACHD.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
The other couple few on there, I'll let them stand. If you have any questions about them, we can talk about them. I did receive another one, again, hot off the press after your packet, but I wanted to get it on your radar. This was a comment submitted to the mayor's office, and let me just zoom in real quick as we talk about this. It's in the same neighborhood that we're just in, practically. So I'll read this. It says, there's a pedestrian light between Cherry and Ustick on 10 Mile near the fire station. It'd be wonderful if that could be changed to a stoplight at Teeter and 10 Mile so the neighborhood could get out onto 10 Mile safely. It'd also slow down the traffic a bit since they tend to speed. So my first inclination was to talk to the fire department because, so let me zoom in here a little bit. So there is a hawk signal at Teeter. I didn't actually measure this before the meeting, but it is pretty close to the emergency signal that this firehouse has to stop traffic when they need to. There is also Muirfield, which is a fairly major roadway into the rest of the subdivision here. So I talked with Deputy Chief Joe Bongiorno. His response was, as long as it doesn't affect our ability to stop traffic, basically, that again, the proximity of these two, he doesn't necessarily have a concern, but he said, really, we need to talk with ACHD. So we can talk with ACHD, but I thought I'd get it on your radar too first. And again, kind of as is the common theme here, just get it on your radar that we received a correspondence, a request through the mayor's office.
For my bad hearing help, tell me again exactly what the request was.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry if I was too far away from the microphone. So basically, the request is sort of twofold. To convert this pedestrian signal to a full signal.
Okay.
Or maybe potentially even make it at Muirfield. Neither one of those are four-legged intersections, right? So neither one of them necessarily make a great, just on its face, a great candidate for a full signal because you don't have the other leg of that. But basically to get out of the golf course area to get a full signal, essentially mid-mile. So we're right at the mid-mile point between Ustick and Cherry Lane, so that this traffic basically can get into and out of off of 10 Mile Road. That's to paraphrase, that's the request.
What did the fire station stop for the truck light have to do with it?
Just the proximity of that. I know we have some of those.
Got 'em.
Good example is Franklin, right? I mean,
Got
that one's
'em
like right there.
Right over here somewhere. Yeah.
Yep.
Right
But
down
just,
there.
you don't want to have too many of those too close together. And that was my first, the way I took it the first time was they wanted to convert the fire station signal to a full signal at what was this, Muirfield. And she was really saying more of I didn't realize there was a hawk signal, however, to be honest with you. So it really is more to convert this to a full signal, not so much the fire station signal. So
Mr. Watson,
I don't know if he's hearing that for the first time or not, but
I don't know is an okay answer,
Yeah.
but I don't know that that's where you're going.
I don't know. No, this is the first I've heard of it. When he was first reading it, I was thinking the same thing. She wants to move the fire signal and that would be an absolute no-go. We would not move a fire signal for something like that. We could run the numbers for Teeter or for Muirfield, remembering that traffic signals are designed to control right of way at large intersections. They're not designed, nor is their primary mission in life to slow down traffic on a street.
Thank you. Mr. Hood, have you run out of run out of communications?
Mr. Chair, I went through everything in the packet and I brought a bonus one there. So that is maybe before I just turn the meeting back over to you, I will plug and you will be at the city council meeting tomorrow night. So if anyone else wants to come and listen to your chairman give the annual report, end of year report, he is on the agenda. It did get changed. Originally, it was gonna be at 4:30. He was the only thing on the agenda and they said, we're gonna move him to 6 o'clock. So he's on the real agenda, the main agenda, near the beginning though. So if anyone's interested, that is right around 6 o'clock. Your chairman will be giving the annual report. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd stand for anything else you may want to talk about.
Any other questions for Mr. Hood?
Mr. Chair and John Wasson, I do have a short update
Uh,
whenever you're ready.
Let's see if it's the one I was going to ask you about. Go ahead.
We have a traffic calming request in the works for Ashton between Meridian Road and Venable. They did meet the criteria. They did get the signatures. We are in the process of the cut-through study. For them to meet the criteria for ACHD to pay for it, they have to have 23% cut-through.
Give Caleb a second to find it on the map.
Right in here, I
I'm
think.
I'm not
somewhere.
familiar with it.
Between Meridian and Venable off of U-Stick.
Somewhere in here, right? North,
There you are.
is it north or?
Yep, it's on the north leg.
Oh, north side. Okay.
So where-
So
what's the cut through?
Ashby.
we have done the PM. We are doing the AM in the near future. Unfortunately, I can't tell you when we're going to do it because then I'd have to kill you. The PM westbound percentage of cut through traffic, and please forgive me, I could be off a little bit, was 1.74%.
So that's from Meridian on Ashton down to Venerable
Down to U-Stick.
to get to Houston.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
The PM eastbound is going to, it looks like, come in at less than 5%. And they have to have 23%. So they're looking at about in the AM needing about 45% cut through traffic to meet the criteria for ACHD to pay for it. And I should have that wrapped up in the next 10 days.
Did you say in the first place there was enough to justify it? And the question now just who's going to pay for it?
Yes, sir. They met the speed or the volume criteria, and they did obtain the necessary signatures for us to proceed. There just doesn't appear to be that much cut through traffic. And so if under our current policy, which may be changing soon, but under the current policy, if they don't meet the criteria for traffic calming, the neighborhood is typically expected to pay for the installation of the asphalt speed humps. ACHD will still do the engineering, the inspection, the signs, the pavement markings, and everything else. And once the speed humps are into ACHD specification, then we take them away from the neighborhood and would maintain them in perpetuity.
How much does asphalt cost?
A speed hump right now is in the vicinity of $5,000 to $7,000 for a speed cushion.
Okay. Well, price of oil is up. Anything else, commissioners? That's the end of our agenda with the exception of the list of future meeting topics. The one I am going to ask Mr. Wasson about, and a yes or no is a perfectly good answer. Anything new on Celebration Avenue parking?
Mr. Chair, I spoke with the director and he says he's not absolutely opposed to it, but somebody's got to give him a heck of a good reason why we should remove those and increase the danger to the cyclists that are leaving High Desert Harley and going over to the signal at Millennium.
To allow parking on the north side.
That, yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Ballard.
I got a couple of comments if I may.
You may, go ahead.
So the discussion was about prioritization, and I've seen from a couple of meetings now, conversations. Are we able to take into account the cost relative to our ranking of various projects? That seems to have crept into some of the conversation. I don't know that we have that information. Or is that something we can consider? That's an observation on my side. The next one, you'll think I've been out in left field for a couple of weeks, but think about this. We have a rail line that comes through this town. It's a spur. It's not the main line, so you do not have a lot of traffic. We don't see what goes through CUNA. And I'm not trying to play off the current situation on Ohio. But what are the plans if a train were to derail here in the middle of town? You also have to, and I've seen this over the time, they've changed where they back cars into some of the industrial. So they've taken some pressure off of how long a train sits straddling a road. But think down the road, no pun intended, if a rail line comes through here, increases that volume, and the police may have it, the fire may have it. Do we have an idea of what's on those cars coming through our town? And I'm not saying stop it. I'm just kind of curious. That's food for thought down the road, no pun intended, as to, given some thought as we continue to grow, how does that rail line influence what we may or may not be able to do here? That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Lewis, and Mr. Smith, in that order. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Sergeant, a moment.
Caleb, I just don't think